Continuing with our discussion on collisions and what kind of collisions are possible, what kind of collisions are not possible. So to see the earlier part of the argument, what we are discussing here, please see the previous videos and you will understand what we are talking about. Here we are taking two billiard balls, one of which, the ball M2, is stationary and the ball M1 comes and collides into the stationary M2. The ball M1 had initial velocity of V1 and students had proposed that this situation is a possible outcome. What is the situation? M1 going backwards with a velocity V1 prime and M2 going forwards with a velocity of V2 prime. So the question is this possible given that M1 equals M2? Because billiard balls are made of the same material, same density, so therefore, and the same dimensions, so therefore they have the same or more or less the same mass. So I say this is not possible, but how do we know? Let us look at it from the lens of conservation of momentum. Whatever it is, momentum before the collision and momentum after the collision, that is P should be equal to P prime. Now let's examine the situation. P is M1 V1 plus M2 V2. Since V2 is equal to 0, remember the ball was stationary. Therefore, the total amount of momentum in the system before collision was M1 V1. Post collision, the momentum will be the sum of the momenta of the two objects. So therefore, it will be M1 V1 prime plus M2 V2 prime. Since M1 and M2 are the same, I substituted M1 in the place of M2 over here. You can substitute M2 over here also, it doesn't make any difference. But eventually you got to see that M1 multiplied by V1 prime plus V2 prime is equal to M1 V1. Since the masses are the same, we are not concerned about that. Now we are looking at the velocities. For this situation to be true, in terms of law of conservation of momentum, V1 should be equal to V1 prime plus V2 prime. And now we had a nice breakthrough where Sondi said, look, this is the aage position. You take some arbitrary direction and you say that is the forward position or the aage position in Hindi. And this will become the piche position or the backward position. So therefore, V2 prime is positive and V1 prime is obviously negative. Accepting that this situation is possible. We are trying to prove that the whole situation is absurd by assuming that this is true. Let us see what absurdity it brings up. So we say now that for this to be true, coming back to the last statement over here, since V1 prime is negative, V2 prime has to be greater than V1, because if they have to be equal and this is negative, this has to be greater than V1, right? And that is not possible. Why is that not possible? Is because when two objects collide with one another, if one object has a mass much greater than the smaller object, or just say greater than the other object, then when they collide, they apply forces on each other. We have seen that from the third law. These forces are equal and they are opposite. They are working on two different objects. Now, if I ask you, between these two objects, when the same force is applied, which one will have the greater acceleration? Obviously, the one with the smaller mass, right? Because the same force applied on a smaller mass will produce a greater acceleration. So, if two objects, as stated before, have the same mass, then the forces that are acting between them being the same, it cannot produce an acceleration which will produce a velocity which is greater than the original velocity. That is an absurdity by second law and third law. So therefore we can say that this situation is an impossibility. There is no way in which two objects of the same mass can collide with one another and go in opposite directions, because the stationary object would have had to gain a velocity much greater than the original velocity of the first object, which is not possible in physics according to second law and third law. So here's the next challenge. The challenge is situation C, which we have as yet not proven, which is that same situation, stationary ball M2, moving ball M1 collides into it. One of the possibilities that we thought is that both balls move in the आगे direction, in the forward direction, with velocities v1 prime, v2 prime. Now, using the same kind of arguments that we used in situation A and disproved it, can you also prove or disprove that this is possible or not possible, given that M1 is equal to M2 and P is equal to P prime? So this is a assignment, put it as a prep work for you. Try to work it out in exactly the same way as we did before for situation A, and submit your work in the classroom, and we will discuss the solution in the following class. If you like that video, don't forget to hit that like button, do subscribe to my channel, and also share the resource with anybody who you feel will benefit from this. Thank you.